Welcome to another Ziva Math video. In this video, we are going to teach you how to find common denominators when adding and subtracting fractions. We'll show you several methods to use to find the common denominator and how to make equivalent fractions with them, the first steps for adding and subtracting fractions. If you need help continuing with adding and subtracting fraction problems to completion, check out the links to our adding and subtracting fractions and mixed number videos in the description below. For the first two examples, we'll show you the steps to find the least common multiple of the denominators and how to use it as the common denominator. This is the method most of your teachers started with in your classroom lessons. This example is 5/6 minus 1/4, and we need to find the common denominator for 6 and 4. And we're going to do that using the least common multiple, which means we need to find the least common multiple for 6 and 4. And we're going to do that by making a list of our multiples. If you are very comfortable with your math facts and you already know what the least common multiple is, then you don't need to take the time to make the list. If you're unsure, then you would want to go ahead and make the list of all of your multiples. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18, and this is where I would switch and start with the multiples for 4 to see if I have my least common multiple already. Your least common multiple is going to be the smallest number that ends up on each list. So 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 is the first number that I see on both lists. So 12 is my least common multiple, and it's what I'm going to use as my common denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and set up with the common denominator of 12, and let's talk about how we get the equivalent fractions in 12s. Well, for 5/6, to find the equivalent fraction with the denominator of 12, I need to figure out what I multiplied 6 by to get to 12. Well, 6 times 1 was 6, times 2 is 12. So I multiplied my denominator of 6 by 2 to get that denominator of 12. And if I multiply the denominator by 2, I have to multiply my numerator by 2. I'm going to multiply it by the same thing. And 5 times 2 is 10. And I'll need to consider the same steps for the 1/4. What did I multiply 4 by to get to 12? Well, 4 times 1, 2, 3 is 12. So I multiplied 4 by 3 to get to the denominator of 12. If I multiply my denominator by 3, I have to multiply the numerator by 3. 1 times 3 is 3. And now that you have equivalent fractions with common denominators, you can continue with your subtraction steps. In this example, we have 2/3 plus 7/8, and we're going to use our least common multiple in order to find our common denominator for 3 and 8. So I'm going to start by listing my multiples of 3. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. And then I'm going to start listing some of my multiples for 8, because remember, we're looking for the smallest number that's in both lists. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. And from here, I'm going to go back to my list for multiples of 3. My next multiple of 3 is 15. 12 plus 3 is 15. Looking back at my list for multiples of 8, 16 plus 8 is 24. And so I'll need to go a little bit further for my list for multiples of 3. 15 plus 3 is 18, plus 3 more is 21, plus 3 more is 24. And 24 is my least common multiple. It's the first number that appears on both lists. So 24 is going to be my common denominator. And I can set up my equivalent fractions with a common denominator of 24. And what I need to do now is I need to think about, what did I multiply 3 by to get to 24? And if you know your multiplication facts, then you may not need to count up what that number might be. You already know. But if you're unsure or uncomfortable, this is where making the list and then counting can be really helpful. So 3 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is 24. So I'm multiplying the denominator of 3 by 8 to get to 24. If I multiply my denominator by 8, I need to multiply my numerator by 8. 2 times 8 is 16. So when finding my equivalent fraction, I'm multiplying the numerator and denominator by the same number. Now I need to think about what I multiplied 8 by to get to 24 to find my equivalent fraction for 7/8. Well, that was 8 times 1, 2, 3. So I multiplied my denominator of 8 by 3 to get to 24. And because I multiplied my denominator by 3, I need to multiply my numerator by 3. 7 times 3 is 21. Now that I have equivalent fractions with a common denominator of 24, I can proceed with my addition steps. When you're faced with an addition or subtracting fractions problem, you don't have to list the multiples to find your least common multiple. You can use any common multiple as your common denominator. We'll set up equivalent fractions using any common multiple as our common denominator for our next two examples. This example is 2/3 plus 1/6. We need to find a common denominator. Right now our denominators are 3 and 6. And if you look at 3 and 6 and you think about 12 as being a common multiple, maybe it's not your least common multiple, but it is a common multiple, we can go ahead and get started. Sometimes all you need is a denominator that you can use to get started. And if we're going to use 12, we first have to think about what can I multiply the 3 by to get to 12 because I need to make those equivalent fractions. Well, 3 times 4 is 12. And if I multiply my denominator by 4, I need to multiply my numerator by 4. 2 times 4 is 8. Then I'll need to do the same thing for the 1/6. I decided to use 12 as my common denominator. And to get to 12, I had to multiply my denominator of 6 by 2. If I multiply the denominator by 2, I need to multiply my numerator by 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Now that I have equivalent fractions with common denominators, I would be able to proceed and work through my addition steps. In this example, I have 2/9 minus 1/6. I need a common denominator. Looking at my denominators of 9 and 6, I know a common multiple is 36. It's not my least common multiple, but because it's a common multiple, I can use that as my common denominator and go ahead and get this problem started. I need to look first at 2/9. What did I multiply 9 by to get to 36? I multiplied 9 by 4 to get to 36. Because I multiplied my denominator by 4, I need to multiply my numerator by 4. 2 times 4 is 8. Then I'll need to do the same thing for 1/6. What did I multiply 6 by to get to 36? I multiplied 6 by 6 to get to 36. If I multiply my denominator by 6, I have to multiply my numerator by 6. 1 times 6 is 6. Now that I have 8/36 and 6/36, my equivalent fractions with common denominators, I would be able to begin subtracting. Another way to find a common denominator is to multiply the two denominators together. The product will be the common denominator. The downside of this method is it can sometimes result in your needing to work with larger numbers. However, if listing multiples takes you a long time, or you can't think of a common multiple your denominators share, this method will always quickly get you to a common denominator. Let's look at two examples using this method. In this example, we have 3/7 plus 5/6. And we're finding the denominator, our common denominator, by multiplying the two denominators together. 7 times 6 is 42. So 42 is going to be our common denominator. And how is that going to look working this out? Well, with our first fraction, we have 3/7. The denominator of the other fraction is 6. So I'm going to be multiplying the two denominators together, 7 times 6. And in my second fraction, the 5/6, I'll need to be multiplying that denominator by the denominator of my first fraction, the 7. And 7 times 6 gives me that denominator of 42, and 6 times 7 gives me the denominator of 42. So multiplying the denominators together gives me a common denominator of 42. Now we need to get our equivalent fractions. So going back to 3/7, I multiplied that denominator by 6. Because I multiplied the denominator by 6, I need to multiply the numerator by 6. 3 times 6 is 18. I can find the equivalent fraction to 5/6 the same way. I multiplied the denominator of 5/6 by the 7, so I'll need to multiply the numerator by 7. 5 times 7 is 35. Now that I have equivalent fractions with common denominators, I can proceed with my addition steps. In this example, we have 5/6 minus 3/4. To find our common denominator, we're going to multiply the denominators together. 6 times 4 is 24, so the common denominator will be 24. And to find our equivalent fractions, we're going to start with those denominators. And with 5/6, we found our common denominator by multiplying the two denominators together. So we'll be taking the denominator of the other fraction, the 4, and we'll multiply 6 times 4. That'll give us that common denominator of 24. And I'll do the same thing for the other fraction. For 3/4, I'm going to multiply that 4 by the 6 from the denominator of the other fraction. And 4 times 6 gives me the common denominator of 24. Now for our numerator, to make these equivalent fractions, going back to 5/6, I multiplied that 6 by 4, so I'll need to multiply my numerator by 4. 5 times 4 is 20. For 3/4, I multiplied the denominator by 6, so I need to multiply the numerator by 6. 3 times 6 is 18. Now that I have equivalent fractions, I can continue on and subtract. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to Ziva Math for more videos.